Hi, welcome to the Poultry Keepers Podcast. I'm John Gunterman, and together with Mandolin Royal and Rip Stelvey, we're your co-hosts for this show, and it's our mission to help you have a happy, healthy, and productive flock.
We're going to be talking about dual-purpose poultry today. What does dual-purpose poultry truly mean? Well, coming up, we're going to explore that concept of dual-purpose poultry breeds, and if you think about it, it can have more than one meaning. So let's get started with, John, we'll pick on you first. What's your definition of a dual-purpose poultry breed?
One that is going to be useful for both eggs and meat. That's about as simple as I can make it.
Okay. Mandolin, what's yours?
Well, for our flock, I'm a big fan of the eggs and the meat, but there can be more than just those two purposes. And some of the other options that there are, you can have ornamental birds that lay really well. You can have birds that you can breed forward yourself, which will be the purebreds rather than hybrids, and that in itself is its own purpose. So it's not just the meat and eggs, but at least two purposes would make them dual purpose, at least to me.
And you're all about the show.
Well, not really. I will confess that I used to be a show guy, but in the last 15 or so years, I began to see what was happening to a lot of our standard bred breeds. They were being bred for the showroom only. There was no consideration given to meat qualities or egg qualities. And I thought, oh, this is really sad. We need to do something about this. But I'm on the bandwagon of this whole dual purpose concept, like Mandolin and like you, John. If we're going to have birds, they need to not only look good, but they need to produce good. Now, whether that's meat or whether that's eggs, so be it. But yeah, dual purpose breeds can serve more than one purpose, like Mandolin said.
Something I noticed in the Standard of Perfection, getting ready for this episode, I wanted to pull it out because I never recalled seeing an egg count in the breed standards. I looked up Chanticleer and I've got a cockerel and a hen weight and, all that data, but it doesn't tell me that, my bird should be a 250 to 275 a year layer.
No, and it's always been that way in the standard, John, from the time it was first written back in the 1870s.
Well, I think a lot of this points to the first section of the SOP where it talks about production qualities. That's always been kind of a gap in my knowledge is, what should I be shooting for eggs per year out of my Chanticleer? It tells me very clearly my size ranges and what the body should look like and what the fleshing should be like and all that. But other than conversing with other Chanticleer breeders and saying, hey, what are your egg sizes and what is your weekly and yearly production? That's pretty much all I have to go by.
I agree with you. There's some historical references for some breeds, like Rhode Island Reds, for example. Back in the 20s and 30s, there were some Rhode Island Reds that were hitting 300 eggs. They were record breakers, but they were also kind of pretty much the exception to the rule. But it shows the potential for what some of these breeds can do.
Well, and that potential is what you can breed for. So if you've got a flock of 25 females and you monitor their rate of lay, and then you monitor that for their first season of laying, then you can select out the ones who are your strongest layers, and those are the ones that you hatch from. Because if you're hatching from your poor layers, you're just going to get more poor layers unless the male brought some improvement in that regard. But each generation, you still have to go through those girls and figure out who your strongest layers are if you are looking to improve that. And I don't worry too much about what other flocks are doing or what the breed is supposed to do, but I'm only looking at our own flock and what they're doing and selecting off of that, because some flocks aren't going to have that laying trait in there strongly, but you can certainly improve it.
Oh, sure. An old poultry breeder who had one of the largest commercial white leghorn hatcheries in the country, Monroe Babcock. And he told me one time, he said, if you really want to improve your bird's rate of lay without trap nesting, he said, just don't set any eggs that are laid after 10 o'clock in the morning. He said your better layers are going to be laying before 10. They come off that roost, they eat a bite, and they get right down to business. They lay an egg, and then they're off and out and ranging around, doing chickening things, as Mandolin would say.
Yeah, that was a big topic of conversation in the last podcast episodes.
Well,
They do. They do. So let's touch briefly on the difference. I hear the terms heritage and standard and dual purpose thrown around, but I believe there is a distinct difference between some of these terms.
There is. For example, Mandolin, I've got a question for you and John. Does the term heritage poultry mean to you guys?
To me, it means that it's a older, well-established purebred bird. It doesn't imply anything about what they're for or what they look like. It's just age of the breed and how long it's been running. That's what heritage to me means.
John?
I would go with that, with the caveat that heritage has also come to mean a certain level of care and handling and transition between the generations, so to speak, where a breeder's, been breeding for a while and getting ready to retire and will help start somebody else up. And they're continuing the heritage of that line or breed. Okay. So we get a little esoteric there, but I think that's a huge part of it, because you can't expect to take, a bunch of chicks from some random person and have them instantly work for you in your environment. So having that connection really helps, and that's usually a regional thing. I mean, you'll notice that certain birds just seem to be grown in certain areas. There's breeds named after states, so there's a lot of credence there, I believe.
There's a lot of implication about the term heritage, and it's used like it's been around since almost day one. Okay, when do you think the term heritage poultry was coined?
I think I want to blame Joel Salatin, or thank Joel Salatin. I think he was part of that resurgence, but I don't know.
Mandolin, you want to take a shot at it? There's a specific year when it came into being.
Oh gosh, I don't know, but if I had to guess, maybe I don't even know what to guess. Just tell me.
I'd say 1952. I blame 1952 for everything.
The year 2000.
That recent? I was born between the early 1900s and maybe around the 50s or 60s after the commercial stuff hit the scene. I didn't know it was that recent.
Very recent. When the reason that it came about, and the Livestock Conservancy was the people that brought it about as a way to market old poultry breeds. There was back about then, there was this huge influx of heirloom seeds, pass along seeds, heritage this, heritage that. Well, they just jumped on the bandwagon and coined heritage poultry.
Well, it fits.
Great. So thanks for that, because it's helped. The timing and the naming and everything, I think, was so perfect when the Livestock Conservancy started with the Buckeye Restoration Project. I mean, I think it was a perfect confluence, and the community was ready for this restoration and hungry for the knowledge.
And I'm not convinced that using the term standard bred poultry really highlights on the heritage, because some of these breeds they're hundreds of years old.
And some of them are just, what's the newest breed in the standard?
I hope Rip knows.
I was just going to share an example with you, and where the term heritage has not helped. Okay. The way that the term heritage is defined is that it's a breed that was in existence prior to 1950. Okay. Or not in existence. It was a breed that was recognized by the American Poultry Association prior to 1950. That covered, at that point, pretty much all the breeds in the APA standard of perfection. But we've had other breeds come along, Marans, for example. That breed has been in existence well before 1950. But it's not been recognized by the APA until just about 15 years ago. So it doesn't qualify to use the term heritage poultry, which I think is an absolute crying shame.
I think so too, because it goes way back into France.
Hundreds of years. And there's other breeds too that have come over, leg bars and we could go on and on and on, but they could legally never use the term heritage poultry.
No, it's controlled like that? Like trademark or
USDA?
Oh,
geez. Thanks.
I don't know how I feel about that.
That's kind of like going to get an antique tag for your car. It used to be if your car was 25 years old, they gave you an antique tag and you can only drive it on Sundays or for parades or for mechanical purposes. But, you got some special privileges, like a reduced rate of registration.
We're going to start going into a completely different conversation.
I know. But what is an antique?
We're good at
So that's our frame of reference, at least.
Well, let's talk a bit about how the written breed standard, builds the bird. And there's some common terms like width, depth, length, fleshing that aren't tightly defined. Okay. And so the best advice I can give to folks is it's relative to the breed you're working on. Don't compare your breed to another breed. For example, Mandolin breeds breast. Okay. Mandolin, what does the standard call for in the breast back, the width?
They want broad, and broad is going to be subjective. And they want a long back, and that length is going to be subjective, because when they start throwing around those terms, to me, it means that you're comparing the birds to each other and looking for who's meeting that definition. And it's not so much about getting the absolute longest and the absolute widest and broadest birds, because you still have to maintain balance. Because if you see one that's got a long back, but then you take a couple steps back and really look at that bird, if that length shows like as the strongest feature, then it's too long. Like, you have to maintain balance and perspective when you're looking at what those terms could mean for the bird that's in front of you.
All the other parts of a bird have got to work in harmony.
Well, we're always talking about balance. So that's the first thing. Draw that line straight up from the legs, and are we balanced? And then if that works, all the other pieces just seem to fit.
Yeah. So when you've got that
when something's off, something's wonky.
Yeah.
And you go, something's off here.
If we were to, and using breast as an example, if we were to compare back width on breast to the back width on leghorn.
Oh, that'd be so different.
Oh, yeah. But they're basically described the same way.
But they're in relation to each other amongst their flock.
Exactly.
You can't compare one breed standard to another breed. Even if the words cross over, the basic mechanics are going to be different. It's a different.
Exactly right. And here's another touchy subject for some people: the importance of the breed's standard weight. And my mentor told me something years ago. He said, "Son, weight and size are two very different things."
Oh, yeah.
And I was a little confused at that, but I have come to know that is a gospel truth. And Mandolin, I know you've talked about it in some of your videos and some of your writings, that we can get a breed too large. We can get them too heavy. And then they lose that purpose for which the breed was created. Am I not right?
No, you're absolutely right. Because if you focus too hard on one thing about them, it doesn't take too terribly long to have them outperforming on the one thing and underperforming elsewhere.
And with your breed, it specifies the very fine bone structure.
Yeah,
so it's going to be pretty easy. It's going to be pretty easy to grow the bird too big for it to support itself if you're not careful and you just breed for size only. Is that correct?
Yes, and they can start to lose their proportions, and they can start to get lazier. And then the growth rate can change too, because I noticed that there can be about 3 different ways that they will grow. And those 3 ways that they grow have an impact on what they're going to look like and how they're going to do. So some of the birds that shoot up in growth for height, once you get your hands on them, you feel heavier, thicker bone, not much meat. They look wonky and gangly for a long time, and it changes your harvest window because they need so much more time to flesh back in after that growth spurt of height and bone. And it changes from like a 16-week processing to like 22 weeks if they have that tall giraffe growth rate. I call it like a turkey growth rate because heritage turkeys grow that way. Versus birds who are going to be shorter legged, more compact with a finer, more delicate bone. They have a much easier time of retaining their fleshing for the duration of growth, which opens up when you're able to harvest them.
And you can even start harvesting earlier if you need to.
So far, the earliest I've done it is 14 weeks, and that was a very respectable result. It was, like 3 pounds and some change, and it was reflected in more fleshing than bone.
Well, you're very familiar with bantams. Do you think a bantam could be a dual-purpose bird?
I haven't tried it, but I'm fascinated. I love bantams. Those little chatty little boys, and they have so much to say, and they're perky. Bantams are fun little birds, and I've seen instances of some very nice dual-purpose looking ones in the Bantam Chanticleer and the Bantam New Hampshire. I've seen people using silkies for that, for the medicinal soup that comes from the black skin, black meat type of birds. Silkies can be dual purpose.
You know, of course, I've raised a lot of different breeds over the years, but I had Plymouth Rock Bantams and Wyandotte Bantams and Rhode Island Red Bantams that laid an astonishing amount of eggs. And they were very, very meaty carcasses as well.
Can you explain what a bantam is inherently? Is it just somebody selected for a smaller, progressively smaller, or did they breed out to something to get that smaller size and then select back to it?
There are some naturally bantam-sized breeds. Seabrights, for example. That was a naturally occurring bantam. And while most breeds have a large fowl and a bantam component, not all, Seabrights. There is no large fowl Seabrights. There is no large fowl Nankins. It's bantam only. And basically, one way to look at it is that a bantam bird is if there's both, if there's large fowl and bantams, a bantam bird should be a duplicate of its large fowl counterpart. Okay? They should not look different.
Yeah, the proportions should look the same. Sort of like with miniature horses. When you look at a picture of a miniature horse, it should not look small. It should look just like the big one.
Right. If there wasn't a tall person in the picture, you wouldn't know it was a miniature.
Yeah, and it's proportions that do that.
But as a rule of thumb, bantams should be 1/5 the size, roughly, of their large fowl counterpart.
Okay, but how did they get there? I guess is my question.
There was various routes, okay? Sometimes they would cross a large fowl into a bantam bird. Right? For example, I talked with Kenny Bowles one time. Kenny was a longtime breeder of New Hampshire large fowl, but he is the originator of New Hampshire bantams. And I asked him one time how he did that. And he told me that he started out by crossing a New Hampshire large fowl with a Rhode Island Red Bantam.
That makes sense. Keep the color easier.
And then just continual selection, okay?
Sure.
For the smaller side bird that look like New Hampshires and not Rhode Island Reds. But that happens on a fairly regular basis.
Okay.
They're working on Bantam Morans.
And I've seen one of the regular posters on the Poultry Keepers 360 Facebook page. I don't know if I can throw him under the bus, but Timothy Juergens, his Chanticleer bantams are gorgeous. I know him from the Chanticleer fanciers as well.
Oh, they're very tidy little birds. And then when I saw what he posted for the dressing out, oh, that was beautiful.
Yeah. And
those were really neat pictures.
For sure.
It makes me want some again.
It makes me, loathe that I have such a small capacity here.
Just keep building.
I can hatch large, but I carry over small.
Well, that's one of the advantage of bantams. they don't require the amount of infrastructure to maintain a good-sized flock of them as it does their large fowl counterparts.
All right. Well, I'm being dragged down the quail road right now. So give me about December 16th, and then I might be ready for a new project.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first.
John will have
That's
on
We're going to hold you
for
to
all
that.
the quail.
What about good egg production numbers? Mandolin, you probably have more experience of this than anybody working to get their egg numbers up. What are your thoughts? What would be an ideal top end number of eggs per hen per year in breasts?
I like to see at least 250. And I've been monitoring my fall hatch birds from last season, and they are now at the 150 mark with another 5 months to go to track that full year of when they started laying. So I've got to get through winter and see how they perform there before I have the numbers, which I'm excited to see because they've been troopers all the way until it hit 95 degrees or more. Then they took a week off for that, but I still had 2 that trucked right through it. So those 2 became my favorites because when they lay during weather changes and daylight changes, if they keep going, those are the best girls. But I think of it usually more as a weekly number, and I am looking for a minimum of 5 eggs a week from each female.
Now, here's another question for you. What were your production numbers like when you first started?
They were good enough to sell me on the breed. I was getting that 5 to 6 eggs a week, and then I had some, like there was one, she never did lay an egg. And that threw me off because she was great otherwise. So we went ahead and paired her with dumplings. But you have to watch out for those birds that aren't productive so that you can.
Well, naturally, they're going to self-select themselves out of the gene pool.
There's that, but how long do you want her sitting in the coop taking up roost space?
Yeah.
Not only that, eat and feed.
Yeah.
Well, you
it costs a lot to maintain freeloaders. So you have to.
But you're starting to pedigree mate now, and you're going to have a tighter track on who's laying how many eggs.
Yeah, I've hit that wall where I'm excited to start pair hatching. I haven't worked out the kinks yet, but I'm excited to see the data that comes from that because it's just going to help me make better flock decisions and get a little more detailed.
Honestly, I think it will help you move further, faster in the future.
Yeah. I think if you have a pen of 4 or 5 of your best laying females and put your best rooster in there, once you figure all that out, and then either trap nest or not, that gets into a whole nother nightmare. Or individual pen mating. That's a whole nother, it's a lot of logistics concerns to pedigree mating.
Well, while I go through that process, what I would do different in my next poultry building, since we are thinking about moving to a larger spread and expanding out on some of what we do, what I learn over this next season is going to let me know how I need to build out things differently on the second go. That'll be exciting.
Experience in that area is a very valuable teacher.
Yeah. You know what I've looked for a couple times is just a good blueprint for a poultry breeding house. You know, it seems silly that everybody is constantly reinventing this. You know, it's a lot of it is what works for you in your space, but you know, kind of a template to work off of would be nice.
Well, I recently had someone reach out and ask for if this was my barn, what would I do with it? Because he's building a brand new 20 by 30 barn. And I said, you know what? Let me get some graph paper and I'm going to doodle out a couple options because it fascinates me on the possible efficiency of a setup. And I'm not able to go out and build it right now, but he can. So I'm going to go ahead and do a couple doodles and then he can let me know how it goes.
Well, if you want to do it in miniature, you've seen what I've been building out in one bay of our 2-car garage. You know, I've got the quail covey catchers and all that.
You know, it can get to be a chore lugging water from pen to pen, even dragging a water hose, toting feed. One of the most efficient looking setups I have ever seen. Didn't see it in person because this was back in the late 1920s. But it was designed like a wagon wheel.
Oh, I've seen that one.
In the center of all this was his feed storage, his egg collection area, and he had, I don't remember now how many pins, it was like 12 or 14 pins that radiated out into shape, almost like a pie shape. Okay.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of barns designed by shakers, round barns, because it's very efficient for feeding animals and husbandry.
But all the maintenance part of it was handled in that center hub. The coop that the birds slept and laid in was in the back end of it, near the center of the hub, and it was just a short walk to cover all those pens.
I saw a similar design where in the very center of the wheel type of design, that's where they had their stacked brooders right there in the middle. And then they had a feed room inside of that. I think it was more octagon shaped than a circle, but it was very efficient.
What about production abilities? Now, I think we all agree that production really matters, but we've talked about egg numbers. What about egg size? What egg size do you shoot for?
I won't hatch anything less than 60 grams.
John?
Oh, sorry, I stepped on Mandy there probably. 60 to 65 grams is my hatching window.
Can you get eggs too big?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
I had one the other day that was 103 grams.
Holy
crow. That's good hen to pass that without prolapsing.
Well, bone spacing. She passed it like a champ, but it was definitely a double.
Double yolker?
Oh, yeah. If it gets over 90 grams, it's always a double or triple yolk.
Okay, so you've had triples.
Yeah, I don't care for that. Yeah. It's like you're missing out on 2 other eggs there, Missy.
Time to dial back on all the goodiness in the
Don't try so hard. That's not the kind of overachievement we're looking for.
My mentor always told me, if it's not a large or an extra large, if it's anything besides those two, don't set it.
Right.
Because you'll have problems.
Well, I've got these old English pheasant fowl that actually somebody's coming to adopt next weekend, but I'm still collecting all the eggs that I can, and I want to set them and hatch them regardless. So we'll take what we get. And I don't have a frame of reference for egg size because there's just no information I can find on these guys.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's not much out there on them.
I would expect, probably based on their size and their ancestry and their history, I'm thinking mediums. Probably what they're going to lay.
Back when I had Bantams, I was accustomed to them doing an egg every other day. I didn't have any daily layers that were Bantam.
Well, for efficiency, I am very astounded at quail. Their feed conversion ratio, you can't touch it. Chicken, good. Chicken's very good, especially compared to red meat.
Folks who have been talking about production numbers and how many eggs and how big of an egg. But getting back to this heritage concept, if you go shopping online for heritage poultry, I think you need to be aware that most of the lines out there are not going to come close to those kind of numbers if you're getting them from a local breeder. Mm-hmm. If you're getting them from a hatchery, you may get those egg numbers, but you're not going to get the body size.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of size lost once you get into the hatchery stock because they've been more selected towards that efficient laying. 9 times out of 10, you'll get the good laying, but you're not going to get the table traits more often than not.
Right.
Well, I think you're inherently starting at a disadvantage by going with hatchery stock because they're not going to be providing their parent birds with the same level of selection to begin with, nor the same level of nutrition that a real backyard breeder who understands the physiology of the bird is going to do to produce the optimum egg to hatch out. And then we've got shipping on top of that. And if you live 17 miles down a dirt road, we're going to add a whole lot more trauma to that egg. And yeah, there's this just level of husbandry and care that goes into producing a good egg of the proper size that's going to produce a chick that can grow. If the chick is small to start with, it's never going to grow into a big enough bird.
It may carry the genetic potential, but the bird itself isn't going to show it off.
Right. So you're going to have to get it. You're going to have to, carry them forward enough to get them up to a proper size to start hatching your own and express the genetic potential that's there. So it's at least 1 season, if not 2, before you're even coming close to a proper chick size to start with, I think.
I think, when you're shopping for heritage poultry, if you're buying them from an individual, for most breeds, okay, most standard bred breeds, you're going to be looking at egg production somewhere around 100 to 150 eggs per hen per year. Okay. So factor that in. If you have a family of four, average family, you know how many eggs you're going to consume in a year? Mm-hmm. Any ideas? It's for a family of
I target a dozen a week.
It's usually around 1,116 eggs or 93 dozen eggs in a year.
That's about what I do.
For somebody
just
who
by
keeps
myself.
Poultry? But the average consumer that's going to the grocery store and buying a dozen or 2 dozen eggs per week as part of their annual grocery they're eating that many? I remember before I was a poultry keeper, it was like a dozen a week was good. Now I eat a lot more eggs because we have a lot more eggs, and I'm not going to the grocery store and handing out money and buying them and bringing them home.
Our household, when we were buying eggs, when my husband was in the military, that's like the only time that I have not had chickens was when we were moving all the time. But we were doing either an 18-pack or 2 dozen a week just for the two of us.
Well, like I said, those are average numbers. Some families will eat more. Some families will eat less. It just kind of depends. But that's a good reference point. So if you're planning for how many hens you're going to need, factor in those average production numbers and the average egg consumption, and then add 2 or 3 more hens on top of that.
Right. Because, we take days off occasionally. And then half,
I always
roughly,
heard,
if you're lucky, everything you hatch is going to be a male. So what do you do with all of them?
Oh, you mean the cockerel problem?
Dumplings.
Hatch 10 eggs and 8 of them are boys?
Okay.
The smaller the hatch, sometimes the more skewed the average can be. Like if you're looking at 500 eggs hatched, it's going to be roughly 50-50 male to female. But once you get away from that quantity and you get down to 10, 15, 20 eggs,
all bets are off.
It seems to skew towards the male for some strange reason.
And I get asked all the time from locals, hey, do you want these extra boys I hatched? And I'm like, no, I don't. If you don't have NPIP, it violates my NPIP. And I know gosh dang well that they're going to be scrawny and squirrely and take forever before I can put them in the freezer.
Somebody asked me that a couple of months ago. Said, I've got all these males. Do you want them? I said, no, I don't want them for the same reason you don't want them. They're expensive to feed and don't give you much in return.
Yeah. I tell people I will be happy to come over and help you harvest them and teach you the process in exchange for some of the meat. But I'm not going to carry those mouths to harvest.
Exactly.
Yeah, the growth rate needs to be worth it. And that's a rabbit hole that I've been down before because I've always had this hatching thing. Ever since I was a kid, I'd hatch. And I would always end up buried in cockerels. And I dealt with that for a couple of decades before it dawned on me, wouldn't they taste like chicken?
So let's make sure that when we do hatch cockerels, that we're giving them every opportunity to reach their genetic potential and give us the best possible feed conversion ratio that they can.
Well, it's really quite staggering too. If you think of the numbers, and I'm not going to, go into overwhelming math, but think of it this way. All of the urban flock keepers, everyone with their couple of hens in the yard, they might have 6, 8, 12. But every single pullet hatched and born, there's a male that hatched with her as a general rule of thumb. And there's many, many flocks out there that are female only. So that's just that many males that now have nowhere to be and nowhere to go. And the hatcheries scramble to do different things and managing that because their number one seller is always going to be a pullet. And the sex links, they're pretty useful because it can be foolproof if you're one of the people who can't have males at all where you live. There's little safety nets in acquiring your pullets to make sure you only get pullets. But you can get fry pan bargain specials where you get males for literal pennies. I think the last time I got a box of cockerels, they were 25 cents a piece. And it's like, surely these birds have more value than that. I mean, they should. But more often than not, the growth rate's not there, the fleshing isn't there, and there's nothing else to do with them, which is sad.
Well, if they came from a line that was bred to be layers, and they're the cockerel, offshoot of it, they're
about
not
your
going to
luck,
be meat
buddy.
birds because they're not selecting for the dual purpose traits, I believe.
Yeah, and that's why I started doing the breeding and doing a breed that was really dual purpose so that those cockerels have a job, they have a place to go, and they're every bit as important as the females.
Yeah. So another thing to consider is, do you have the infrastructure and the financial resources to care for all these extra males, or an ethical outlet for them?
That's something anyone hatching eggs needs to be aware of and to think of. And if you're not in a position to raise those males, maybe reconsider doing the whole hatching egg thing. Unless you know someone who can take them. It can be, because I've been in the position when we were living more urban, and it was, a 45-minute drive to get anywhere near the country. And no one within our area could have the males. And I'd have, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 males that literally no one wanted, priced at free. 100% free, just come get it. No one did.
When do you like to separate out your males from your females for your first?
I like to have it done by 8 weeks. By then it's really obvious. And then also the hormones aren't quite there yet, but they're thinking about flaring up over the next 4 to 5 weeks.
That doesn't hold true for all breeds. I want to throw that caveat out there. Mandolin's working with a single comb breed, but if you're working with a P-comb breed or something like that, it's very, very difficult to tell. They got to be considerably older than 8 weeks before you can reliably sex them if you're going by the combs. Now, eventually, once the males start developing those secondary sex feathers, like the hackles and saddle feathers start getting pointed where the females stay round, that's far more reliable than the combs.
Like those two pullets that I delivered to Mandolin that later turned out to be cockerels.
Yeah, I probably should have looked at
them. But at the time,
they have a cushion
but
comb.
They have no comb.
They have a cushion comb, which you can't even, with, what is it, P-combs?
Well, those are even worse than P-combs.
Well, P-combs on the males, they'll have 3 rows of little miniature spikes, and the females will carry just a single row for quite a while. And on a cushion comb, there's no spikes at all to even give you a little tease of a peak. They're smooth and flat and tell you nothing until, 16 weeks?
But they still taste like chicken.
Well, yeah.
Well, folks, I think we've probably covered and given you our thoughts on dual-purpose poultry. I just want to thank you for joining us this week. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you can receive new episodes right when they're released, and they're released every Tuesday. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we'd like to ask you to drop us an email at poultrykeeperspodcast@gmail.com and share your thoughts about the show. Thank you again for joining us for this episode of the Poultry Keepers Podcast. We'll see you next week.